Next steps. We talked about it last night. I mean, Sherrone Moore is the obvious pick as Michigan's head coach by all accounts. I mean, that is going to be the hire for Michigan. Also talked about the 7-day period here by state law because Michigan's a public institution that they may have to post the job posting. And look, I think everyone kind of knows it's Sherrone Moore. It would be a lot more convenient if they're able to actually make that hire official as soon as possible. Now, they could get a waiver. Don't know how that works. Our Chris Ballas reporting this morning that, even they weren't sure and they haven't gone through this before, so they're not sure, to which I would say, I mean, they should have been looking into this probably in the days or weeks or months before this, because there was a possibility this was going to happen. But getting that done as soon as possible is huge. Then you can work on the coaching staff. Then you can work on the players as well. But, and I know, again, we talked about this in the show last night, but basically, we're checking in here on Thursday afternoon to say that, none of that has happened yet. But clearly the sooner the better would be the theory there for Michigan.
Well, hopefully a waiver is easier to obtain than a TRO was. I'll just lead by saying that. That doesn't give me any confidence that anything's going to get pushed through. But Connors. There was I don't want to out or make anyone look stupid, but there was, we get these marketing emails from sports books, and one of them sent me one like an hour ago that had Sherrone Moore at plus 200 to be Michigan's next head coach, which was the leading candidate. But
did you bet it?
Let me just say this. If you find any sports books that are offering you plus 200, put however much money you're comfortable spending on it, because it's free money. It's going to be Sherrone Moore. There's, if the timing was a little bit different, if there was an alternate universe where Kalen DeBoer was available and not just hired at Alabama,
you'd have to call
been, that's when we start talking about national search. But, Sherrone Moore is a candidate. I've seen some people thrown Lance Leipold in there, Chris Kleiman. Those guys are good coaches. But again, I don't think you can sell that to me as a tangible upgrade unless Sherrone Moore goes into a meeting with Ward Manuel and just doesn't have a good plan. Because, he still does have to have and sell a plan. It can't just be, we're going to do all the things that we were doing already. He's going to have to bring his own flavor to it as well. But I think this is the best course of action moving forward. I think that obviously we've talked about roster continuity. And one of the things that was tied into this 7-day waiver, you can get it if it's determined to be something that's, beneficial for your business, or if it needs to be expedited. I would argue having your players poached is important to business. I don't know if the letter of the law sees it that way. But, Sherrone Moore has the support of former players. He's got the support of the guys already on the roster. And anyone acting like there's going to be some mass exodus, I'd assume that if we're going to see portal movement, it's going to be after spring ball, because guys are enrolled now. They're in class. Like it's really tough to do that, even though the portal is open to them. I suppose you could always announce an intent to transfer, but these guys have been prepared for this. I think there's been a knowledge that if it's not Jim, it's Sherrone. I believe that recruits have been told the same thing on the trail if you talk to our recruiting guys. So I don't see this being like a bumpy transition like it was for a Washington or an Alabama. Again, assuming that he is the guy that gets the job. So again, the next steps from there, we talked about it last night. I think that whether Jesse Minter is destined for the NFL or not, you got to make him an offer to make him the highest paid assistant in college football and let him make that decision. You have to retain Ben Herbert, which I think they'll be able to do. A lot of people are surprised the Spanos family stepped up and gave Jim Harbaugh what he needed to make that jump to the NFL. So I certainly, if Jim Harbaugh insists on having him, maybe they cut a check, but strength coaches just not as important as they are at the college level, given these guys have their own personal trainers and whatnot in the NFL. I think they'll be able to retain him. And then it's all eyes are on Ward Manuel. All eyes are on this Michigan administration in making sure that Sherrone Moore is as supported and NIL is as streamlined. And, it's time to start quite frankly, it's time to start doing business like a team that is the winningest program in college football and is coming off of a national championship. There's no excuse not to do that. And if you're against that, if you're someone who's resistant to that, there's the door. Because this is not, you can't just plug in Sherrone Moore like they did on game day and just say, oh, well, here we go. Train keeps rolling. No, this is going to operationally look a lot different, assuming, again, that Sherrone is the guy. So those are the next steps as far as I'm concerned. And where it goes from there, I mean, you're going to need to replace at least one staff member on the offensive side of the ball. If Sherrone is elevated, I think, if Minter goes, I assume Rick Minter probably goes too. So those are two spots on defense you need to backfill. If Jay Harbaugh goes, that's a spot you need to backfill. So the sooner they can get this done, the better, because then you do get that finality heading into making preparations for spring ball and all of that. So that's my long-winded response to what's next.
What's funny is going back to the TRO, you mentioned if they did get that, Sherrone Moore wouldn't have had those 3 games as Michigan's interim head coach, and people would be feeling a lot differently about it. So maybe Tim Connors, the judge there, I wouldn't say did him a favor, because I think everyone still, even in hindsight, would have been a little more comfortable with Jim Harbaugh on the sideline, and just the fact that it seemed like justice. It seemed like he deserved to be out there. But what if, they didn't get that, and we didn't get to see Sherrone Moore be the head coach in those big games? It's just something to kind of ponder as we sit here today. And then I also had another what if that came to my mind as I was thinking about this. What if Dan Enos didn't spend 10 days or whatever it was at Michigan, because he was at Central with Sherrone Moore? Then he comes to Michigan for 10 days as an offensive assistant. I don't even think he had an official job title yet. And he told Jim Harbaugh about Sherrone Moore, a huge reason why Sherrone's here. And he probably wouldn't have been discovered by Jim Harbaugh had those conversations not happened and had Dan Enos not come to Michigan. So just a couple things to think about, AB.
Yeah, this was where I was going with my rant before, but I think that a lot of people are uncomfortable at the thought of, I wouldn't say uncomfortable. I think most people are on board with it if it's Sherrone Moore. There are some people who are like, well, look at what happened at Stanford with David Shaw. And, they had success early. It tapered off. First off, I think if you have that 4 or 5 years of success right off the bat with Sherrone Moore, it's worth it 1,000%. And, Michigan is a school that has the infrastructure to build off that. It's not like Stanford, where it's a lot more stringent to get guys in, and you don't quite have the same pipelines from a recruiting perspective. But if Sherrone Moore was the offensive coordinator for Alabama or Washington or Texas, just look at the other teams in the college football playoff, and his name popped up as a candidate for this job or any job, I think a lot of people would be super comfortable with what he brings to the table from a recruiting perspective, from an offensive play calling perspective. This isn't, I know it's automatically going to draw look, Michigan has a coach that's born on third base now, which, by the way, he is 1-0 against Ryan Day. People forget that. Ryan Day got beat by the substitute teacher. I think Sherrone Moore, could have had a Power 5 job last go around. I think if things played out differently at Michigan, he could have maybe had one in this cycle, certainly would have had one next year. But he's ready for this, and he's up for it. He's qualified for it. Some of his again, operationally, we'll see if he's the guy, if he holds on to play calling duties, or if a Kirk Campbell is elevated and it's kind of like a passing game coordinator type thing. Again, this is all speculative right now, but he's qualified for this job. Make no mistake about it. And for the people that would prefer national search or to look outside the family, I think there's at least one major recent example, recent being 15 years ago, of why that's probably not the way to go moving forward. So I think that coming off of the last 3 years, coming off of winning a national title, where Sherrone Moore was credited for 4 of those wins, right? Or at least a few of them in the official record books. You got to feel about as comfortable as you could possibly, if this was, we talked about this too. This was 2 years ago when it was just 2021 happened. It was a great season out of nowhere, and then he leaves. Maybe you're scrambling a bit, but this is a guy, so much was made about Biff Poggi being Jim Harbaugh's right-hand man, but Sherrone Moore has been that. Ben Herbert has been that. They've been the hands of the king, so to speak, if you like to use that type of that language about it. But he's qualified, and they're ready for this, and he would add some different flavor. He's going to put his own touch on it as the guy that has to set the schedule and everything like that. But he has been prepared for this. And I think that if it is Sherrone, this is what Jim Harbaugh would have wanted. I think Michigan's comfortable with that. And that's why, again, if you see any sportsbook offering you plus odds on him being your next head coach, like, tell me how much you want me to send you. Like, I'll get in on it with you. So.
Well, speaking of the schedule too, thank God they moved spring ball back from Valentine's Day, because they do have a couple things to figure out here in the next several weeks.